We'll call the meeting to order. The Standing Committee on Access to Information, meeting 141. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083H7, Study of Privacy of Digital Government Services. Today we have with us from Sidewalk Labs, Dan Doktoroff, Chief Executive Officer, Micah Lasher, Head of Policy and Communications, and John Broadhead, Director of Policy and Strategy. Before we get going, though, we have a motion from one of our members. Mr. Angus, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and I don't want to take any time out of this important meeting, but I will be bringing forward a motion for debate on Thursday that pursuing to Standing Order 1083H6 and given the testimony provided by the former Attorney General of Canada, that public office holders Katie Telford, Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, and Ben Chin, Chief of Staff to the Minister of Finance, be invited before the committee to answer questions related to their conduct in pressuring the former Attorney General and members of her staff in order to secure a deferred prosecution agreement for SNC-Lavalin.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. Any discussion to that effect? Our time is limited, but go ahead, Mr. Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. We would support that motion, and I think it's entirely relevant at this point in the year and in the midst of the continuing corruption scandal.
Thank you, Mr. Kent.
I'd like to just put it to a vote.
Yeah, let's just do a vote.
Yeah, let's put it.
Just,
I'd like to put it to a vote.
To the motion.
But I could bring it forward off the floor.
Have we received any notice of this? At what point?
Can we vote on it right now? Okay, so, Mr. Angus, I'm just told by the clerk that we can't vote on it today. It has to be given notice, so we are
Even if I did it orally?
Maybe, do you want to speak to that, Mr. Clerk?
Yeah, it's got to be committee business if you want to do it on the fly.
Yeah, doing it orally just signifies that you're giving notice of motion rather than submit it by email and have it be distributed by the clerk. Notice has been given now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Angus. I will note, too, we started a little bit late, and this group does have to be catching a plane, so they have to be leaving here by 5, so our time is somewhat limited, so we'll get going right away. Go ahead. I believe we're starting with Mr. Doktoroff. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. Bonjour. Thank you to members of the committee for having us here today. I'm Dan Doktoroff, CEO of Sidewalk Labs, and I'm joined by Micah Lasher, our Head of Policy and Communications, and John Broadhead, our Director of Policy and Strategy. Sidewalk Labs was founded in 2016 to look at new approaches to challenges facing cities around the world. We are a subsidiary of Alphabet, the holding company that also owns Google. Our focus is on combining people-centered urban design with cutting-edge technology to achieve new standards of sustainability, housing affordability, mobility, and economic opportunity. On March 17, 2017, Waterfront Toronto issued an RFP seeking an innovation and funding partner to, quote, help create and fund a globally significant community that will showcase advanced technologies, building materials, sustainable practices, and innovative business models that demonstrate pragmatic solutions toward climate-positive urban development. The RFP centered on Quayside, a roughly 12-acre site at the foot of Parliament Street, while also noting that the selected partner would, quote, contribute appropriate financial resources and/or solution components to support building and district-level solutions for the Eastern Waterfront, and assist in developing a viable and implementable model for sustainable transit along the Eastern Waterfront into the Portlands that can be supported by a combination of government and private sector funding, end quote. Upon reviewing the RFP, we saw an extraordinary opportunity to make Toronto the home of our marquee project, and we operated on the assumption that it would take everything we had to win. We were fortunate to have the support of our parent company as we decided to devote more or less full resources of Sidewalk Labs toward the response. Had we been a more traditional business, we would have been unable to do this. We had also assembled a team with deep expertise in urban innovation, and our willingness to spend $50 million on a planning process entirely at our risk was, I imagine, unique. All of this made us unusually well positioned to compete in a rigorous and fair process. I would encourage you to read the RFP submission we voluntarily published and to seek the release of other submissions to the fullest extent possible, to have the fullest possible picture of what led to our selection by Waterfront Toronto 7 months after the issuance of the RFP, in what Waterfront Toronto has said was the second longest procurement in its history. I want to pause to make clear what rights we did and did not obtain from that procurement. What we won was the right to make a plan at our expense for consideration by Waterfront Toronto and the 3 orders of government. We did not win any development rights, no land was transferred, and the entire process upon which we have embarked and funded came with no guarantees. In the end, Waterfront Toronto's board may simply decide not to implement the plan that we put forward. In late October 2017, we began the work of creating what we in Waterfront Toronto call the Master Innovation and Development Plan. We built an outstanding Toronto team, and I am so proud that John Broadhead is a part of it. Our very first interactions with John came well after the public announcement of our selection by Waterfront Toronto, and John accepted an offer of employment from us only after review and clearance from the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. Over the last year, we have engaged in a public consultation process whose scope, I believe, is unprecedented. Even more noteworthy is that it has all occurred before we've even tabled a proposal. We are, unusually for a company, making our plans in real time and in the public eye. We've hosted 4 major public roundtables, convened 6 advisory groups comprising more than 70 experts, consulted extensively with the Citizens Reference Panel, participated in ongoing dialogue with Waterfront Toronto's Digital Strategy Advisory Panel, and invited all interested Torontonians to visit our headquarters down on the waterfront and engage with members of our team. To date, we have had in-person, substantive engagement about this project with more than 20,000 Torontonians. I would also like to highlight our approach to privacy and data governance, given the important work of this committee. Canada has a strong foundation of privacy laws around personal information and recognizes privacy as a fundamental human right. Consistent with Canadian laws and values on privacy, we made early commitments with regard to responsible data use, including to the principles of privacy by design, to de-identification and data minimization, and to not selling personal data from this project or using it for advertising purposes. During our consultations, we heard concerns about the collection of data in the physical environment by cameras and sensors, what we call urban data. This is proliferating in cities today in a way that is largely unregulated and non-transparent. We see this project as an opportunity to build on and in no way replace or supplant existing Canadian privacy laws, and to put into place the most robust governance framework for urban data that exists anywhere. With that in mind, we have proposed the establishment of an independent organization to oversee the collection and use of urban data, and to do so in a way that protects the public interest while encouraging innovation. We believe that this could make Quayside a globally noteworthy place not because urban data is collected there, as it is in so many other places, but because of how well urban data collected is governed. I should note that we offer these ideas with enormous deference to privacy regulators, with whom we have consulted extensively, to Waterfront Toronto's Digital Strategy Advisory Panel, to this committee, and to those policymakers and government officials whom we recognize are the ones responsible for deliberating and making decisions about the rules of the road at Quayside, by which we will abide. Today, after our immersion in dialogue with the people of Toronto and talented city builders in and out of government, I am more convinced than ever that this project can meet the ambitious objectives Waterfront Toronto articulated in its RFP. Our comprehensive plans for sustainable development will mean that this neighborhood produces 7 times less CO2 than other Toronto neighborhoods. Our innovative approach to tall timber design and construction at a scale never before attempted will catalyze a new industry and end-to-end supply chain in Ontario and help achieve new levels of affordability that will stand in positive contrast to the luxury condominium towers that proliferated along the waterfront. Our housing program will help create a truly inclusive community with 40% of units delivered below market price, half meeting traditional definitions of affordable housing, and the other half targeted at middle-income Torontonians who are getting priced out of the city's core. And our mobility plan will support light rail expansion, provide exceptional bike and pedestrian infrastructure, reduce traffic congestion, and improve pedestrian safety. In every instance, technology will be used in service of these goals, never an end unto itself, and always subject to the robust data governance regime I discussed earlier. Taken together, our plans will create tens of thousands of jobs in Ontario. They will create a dynamic, people-first community to which other neighborhoods in Toronto, and we hope cities around Canada and the world, can look for ideas about how to tackle critical challenges. It has been a privilege to be able to do this work, about which you can probably tell I feel so passionately in Toronto. I'm glad to be here with you today and welcome your questions. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Doctoroff. I believe are you the only one speaking to this? So we'll just go right to questions. So I have first up for 7 minutes, Mr. Vaughn.
Thank you very much. First of all, this committee is looking at the issue of data governance and privacy laws and the need to examine how to protect people and society from big data. Would you, having looked at the Canadian environment, what's your conclusion as to whether or not there's a policy vacuum in this area or not?
I think there is a policy vacuum. It's not just in Canada, but literally virtually everywhere in the entire world. And what we are suggesting, and it really is just a suggestion and a proposal, is a way to deal with urban data in a way that is more comprehensive than anyone has ever done before, building on, I should point out, the strong foundation under Canadian law.
So if this committee and the House of Commons and the province of Ontario or the City of Toronto come up with new measures to protect identity, to protect privacy, to govern the collection and distribution and commodification of data, you will abide by those laws?
Absolutely.
If the approval process, just to be clear as well, because this may veer into land use planning, if past lines of questions are any indication, there is no proposal yet that has been presented to Waterfront Toronto.
That is correct.
There is no commercial transaction of land that has happened yet. That is still subject to approval by Waterfront Toronto.
Everything is subject to approval.
And whatever project comes forward, even if Waterfront Toronto signs off on it, it still must be approved by the City of Toronto through a full public planning process.
Absolutely, as well as in relevant part, the government of Ontario and the national government.
And
as
there is
well.
no contemplation that you would control public infrastructure through any part of this process.
We are not assuming we would control public infrastructure.
And your proposal is not leveraged off of having access to tax revenues from public infrastructure, from other development sites. There is no part of your proposal as it's currently being configured that contemplates taking control over the city's tax base, the city's public infrastructure, or in fact, city data or city information on that front.
That is generally correct. There is one proposal that has been out in the public that we have been considering seriously. One of the most challenging issues is that if you wish to have greater density on the waterfront, which we and I think many others believe is actually critical to increasing the amount of housing and helping to actually alleviate to some extent the housing crisis that is developing, you actually have to find a way to get more people there with mass transit.
And that's consistent with the city plan and precinct plan, which calls for high orders of transit, in particular light rapid transit, LRTs as they're known in Toronto, to service Queens Quay East. And in fact, several of the previous projects that have now been built, but also the next several that are in the approval process, all have been promised by the City of Toronto, a public transit line that flows from Union Station into the Eastern Portlands.
That is absolutely correct. And what I think has been interesting to us is that while everyone acknowledges that is actually a priority and has for roughly the last 10 years, as you point out, there is no realistic plan for the expansion of the LRT into Quayside, along Queens Quay East, into Quayside and into the Portlands, in part because nobody lives on Quayside and the Portlands today.
I disagree. I have constituents there, but
I'm just on Quayside and the Portland. But in any event, very few people.
And just to be very clear about this, you have no plans to extract data, build that transit line, or have any need to govern the way in which that transit line operates?
No, we have zero interest in operating. What we have suggested is that we could potentially play a role in helping to finance something that otherwise does not look.
And one last question. Who contacted you about this opportunity? Which order of government or which public agency made first contact with your organization, and how was that done?
It was in maybe August of 2016. A gentleman who works at Waterfront Toronto, who had worked for me in the past, just reached out to me to talk to me about the land itself.
As a staff architect.
His name's June of 2016. Sorry, yes, a head of planning.
So it
I
wasn't
think.
the federal Liberal government or the Prime Minister.
No.
It was a staffer at Waterfront Toronto who made you aware of the RFP process.
It was well before the RFP was actually issued, nearly a year before the RFP.
Last question. Joe Cressy, someone who we're all familiar with here in Ottawa as a former staffer with Olivia Chow, but Joe Cressy, who is now a city councillor, who sits on the Waterfront Toronto board, as a city councillor, has also proposed that the City of Toronto comes up with rules and regulations to manage data collection, data harvesting, as well as privacy and security issues associated with big data and cities and city infrastructure. Are you confident that your proposal can live within whatever framework is proposed by Mr. Cressy and City Council?
I am confident that it can.
Do you support his process?
Absolutely.
Thank you. No more questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vaughn. Next up for 7 minutes, Mr. Kent.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for attending today. I'm sure you'll forgive those in the GTA and in the City of Toronto who have expressed skepticism and concern about the gradual evolution, the gradual revelations of the changing aspect of this project as somewhat like the Churchillian notion of a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. And I guess my first question to start at the beginning is, when did you realize that the original 12-acre Quayside project wasn't enough for your objectives?
Yeah, well, let me be very clear. The original RFP that Waterfront Toronto issued mentioned not just Quayside, but the broader eastern waterfront at least 20 times. So it was right there from the very beginning. Our response to the RFP, which I believe we delivered in June of 2017, mentioned the broader waterfront 200 times. The project development agreement, which we signed with Waterfront Toronto, talked about the broader waterfront and the need for scale in order to achieve Waterfront Toronto's ambitions for affordability, for mobility, for sustainability, and inclusive economic opportunity.
So your business plan was always for a much larger project than that originally discussed in the RFP?
I think if I may, just to reiterate, the RFP, to Dan's point, specifically said, quote, the partner would assist in developing a viable and implementable model for sustainable transit along the eastern waterfront into the Portlands. The RFP said the preferred partner would, quote, contribute appropriate financial resources and/or solution components to support building and district-level solutions for the eastern waterfront. So respectfully, I think it was pretty clear in the RFP.
But it didn't mention eventual development fees, shared tax revenues as property appreciated.
It did talk about, for example, a combination of government and private sector funding to support those initiatives. So I think, with respect, I think that the plans that are currently contemplated are perfectly in line with what was in the RFP.
And Mr. Doctoroff, you mentioned the 7-month RFP process, and whether or not that's the case or not. One competing bidder, I understand, told Delogic's David Skok that they thought the timeline was 6 weeks and that there was no opportunity given to contemplate an extension. And the quote that's been offered is, "It was made very clear to us verbally that those were the deadlines on several occasions, and so asking for an extension seemed out of the question." So why do you think they would have been left with that impression?
I can't speak to what the others were thinking, and I won't speculate about that. I do think that Waterfront Toronto had reached out in advance of the issuance of the RFP to, I believe it was 52 separate parties. It was no mystery that the RFP was going to get issued. I can only speak to what we did, and what we did was we assembled all of our forces and all of our resources, and we worked around the clock for 6 weeks to assemble something that we were quite proud of. I will also point out that was just the first round of the RFP process, and we went through several additional rounds, all of which, by the way, were overseen by a fairness advisor, a respected associate justice of the Ontario Supreme Court. And we put that same kind of effort into every stage of the process.
Now, the Ontario Auditor General had a number of questions about preferential treatment given to Sidewalk Toronto, and certainly that has been raised again with regards to the fact, and to your point, that the plan, you have only approval from Waterfront Toronto to develop a plan. A plan has not been developed. Some have suggested that the RFP process should be opened again for these broader plans.
Let me just clarify, the Auditor General never suggests or uses the phrase preferential treatment.
No.
She notes the fact that Sidewalk Labs received more information, but that, in fact, drew no conclusions about whether we had such an advantage. She identifies no instance of information being given to Sidewalk Labs that wasn't available to others, and notes that the information was provided to multiple bidders, including one of the shortlisted bidders. We were actually, according to records from Waterfront Toronto, the 25th company Waterfront Toronto met with as part of its market sounding process, which began in February of 2016. Several of the companies that Waterfront Toronto met with, both before and after Sidewalk Labs ended up responding to the RFP, based on my informal understanding of the marketplace, from the marketplace of who responded. So,
But you can understand where someone reading the Auditor General's findings might see preferential
Yeah.
as the package of advantage.
but I think it's pretty clear that the Auditor General did not find that, and I think it's also very clear that the Auditor General compared our RFP response to the others and found ours, I think, significantly more complete.
Good. You mentioned earlier Sidewalk Toronto's willingness to comply with any regulations which exist today or in the policy vacuum may exist in the future. And I'm wondering, given your siblings' recent experience with significant fines from the European Union with regards to the management or non-management of privacy, whether you would still be interested in this project should, as this committee has recommended to the Liberal government, something along the lines of the EU's general data protection regulations were brought into place.
We absolutely would be, and as I said, our expectation is that the privacy regime, particularly for urban data, that we would hope to see implemented at Quayside and beyond, will be even more rigorous.
Thank you, Mr. Kent. Next up for 7 minutes, Mr. Angus.
Thank you, gentlemen, for coming and participating in our study here. Mr. Broadhead, you were with Infrastructure Canada before you went to Sidewalk Labs. So what was the nature of your communications with Sidewalk Labs Alphabet while you were working for the federal government?
Yeah, no, it's thank you for the question. So I worked at Infrastructure and then left and went to be Chief of Staff at Indigenous Services. I had absolutely no contact with Sidewalk Labs while I was Chief of Staff to the Minister of Infrastructure. My first contact with them was after the RFP was completed when I was at Indigenous Services.
So you contacted, did they contact you when you were at Indigenous Services?
They had one of their newly hired staff reached out to me to talk about Toronto issues. She had recently taken on the role and wanted to learn more about Toronto politics. And
So was that the bridge then for you to go work for them?
so then following that, then multiple conversations took place over until kind of late January 2018, at which point I, expecting an offer from Sidewalk Labs, I got in touch with the Office of the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner and had that conversation. And then once the offer was received, I submitted that and all the other information that was required by the Commissioner. And she or the office greenlit my ability to accept that offer in early February 2018.
Thank you. I think one of the concerns we have is certainly the Prime Minister has been very close on this project. And when I read the Auditor General's report, I might be reading a different Auditor General's report than my colleagues that we're asking. But the Auditor General noted one of the problems with this process was that the communications that should have been and consultations that should have been done at other levels were being done at a very high political level. So who was doing that behind-the-scenes consultation at a high political level?
No one that I'm aware of.
Mr. Doktorov?
No one that I'm aware of.
So somebody mysterious was, I mean, this is the Auditor General. This isn't me. You're telling me you don't know who was handling this?
Mr. Angus, I can only speak to our communications, and I can tell you that we scrupulously adhere to the prohibition on contact with government officials in the Waterfront Toronto RFP. That
Okay.
applied to Mr. Broadhead, that applied to any government official, and I would just emphasize that very first conversation Mr. Broadhead spoke about with a Sidewalk Labs employee occurred 1 month after the public announcement of our selection.
Okay. Maybe I don't know where the Auditor General got her facts from. That's strange. We'll have to wonder about that. But the Auditor General found Waterfront Toronto emails that said the board was being urged strongly by the federal government to authorize that framework agreement and putting pressure on. So who from the federal government was doing that pressure? Mr. Broadhead?
I have no idea who they were referring to.
Okay. So when we got a letter recently from Julie DiLorenzo, who was on the real estate board, and she was contradicting Waterfront Toronto, and she was saying that contrary to the claims that there were many IREC meetings prior to the vote on the framework agreement, she said that was false. She said this was a complex, lengthy document, and she was only given 4 business days to review and assess and seek out counsel. And 3 days after receiving the framework agreement at the IREC, there was the meeting of which she would not move this agreement forward to the board with approval. So who was putting the pressure on to get this thing through? I mean, you must have, come on, you know people. They're working for your project.
We respected the rules of the procurement. I do know that when Meg Davis and Christina Werner from Waterfront Toronto testified here, last month or a couple months ago, they did indicate that committee, the IREC committee, on which I believe Ms. DiLorenzo sat, met 6 times.
Okay. Well, she said they made a false statement to our committee. And that to me is serious, because committee is actually like being in court. You have to tell the truth. So if she said that there were no meetings, and that's why she would not bring it forward. But I'm running out of time here. So the Auditor General found that Waterfront Toronto gave information prior to the RFP. They gave more information to your bid than to the other competing bids. So who was giving it from Waterfront Toronto to you prior to that bid?
Let me speak to that, if I may. Waterfront Toronto, in its market-sounding process, invited an exchange with us and, as Dan said, 51 other companies. The information specifically referred to in the Auditor General's report were 3 one-page topographical maps and a 5-page extract on a report on goods transportation. And the law firm of Dentons did a study of those documents and concluded, number one, that the maps were also requested and received by Ellis Don.
Okay.
2, that all of the information was equivalent to information that was publicly available at the time of the RFP. And 3, that it was incidental, if not irrelevant, to the RFP response. And I think that is why Justice Osborne said that he was satisfied. Justice Osborne said that he was satisfied that there was no advantage conferred on Sidewalk Labs after a detailed review of that information.
Why would the Auditor General say that? I mean, I guess my thing that I find hard to believe, like in Canada, our Auditor Generals, we try to treat them like Supreme Court's justice. Well, not the way you guys treat Supreme Court justice. Sorry, maybe I'll retract that. Like when an Auditor General comes out with a report, it's damn serious. And when the Auditor General says that you got more information than others, and you tell me, oh, we got a 1-page map, I find it hard to believe the Auditor General would make note of that and think that that was unfair. So,
Mr. Angus, the facts are the facts.
That's the facts. It was 3
one-page maps.
In the Auditor General's report.
It was 3 one-page maps and a 5-page extract on goods transportation.
Okay.
And Justice Osborne, I should say, says, I am satisfied, quote, that no organization, including the eventual shortlisted proponents, was provided with any information or documentation that was not publicly or readily accessible. The evidence pertaining to this, to me, seems clear.
So just the last question, because Mr. Doktorov, you said second largest RFP in Waterfront Toronto history. Waterfront Toronto said the same thing. We were all scratching our heads because the Auditor General said the opposite. So again, we have the Auditor General that you guys keep saying is just making stuff up out of thin air. But in the RFP, it was from March 17th to April 27th. Now, I'm not a big developer, but that seems like a really short timeline. So how do you say that's the second largest, longest thing that you've ever seen when it was like from March 17th to April 27th? That was the RFP.
Because that was only the first stage of the RFP. The RFP then continued over another 5.5 months.
And the Auditor General said that it was an extremely short, she said like public art projects have to go through about 5 times as long as what you went through. So I just wonder, how did all this happen, and you don't know who was talking behind the scenes to help you? I'm confused.
I don't think it's fair to draw the conclusion that people were talking behind the scenes from a disagreement about the stages of an RFP. Those two things don't seem to me to be connected at all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Angus. Next up for 7 minutes, Mr. Erskine Smith.
Thanks very much. So I have some questions about privacy and data protection. And I guess it starts, we've had a representative from Google here previously, and I generally understand the business model of Google. The services are free. They're not, of course, exactly free in the sense that I am giving my personal information in different ways that I'm able to be advertised to, and Google is able to monetize my information for advertising purposes. So Sidewalk Labs is a subsidiary of Google. Well, Alphabet, I understand. Okay, so same idea from my perspective. I don't understand the business model when I read the materials that say the data collected through these cameras and sensors is to be open data. We believe in a public data trust. How do you make money?
We believe we'll make money essentially three ways. The first is we will develop a small percentage of the waterfront, quayside, and we have suggested publicly one other piece upon which Google's new Canadian headquarters
So a real
would be
estate
looking.
play. There's a
So
straightforward
real estate is one piece of it.
Okay.
A second, as we were discussing earlier, is that we have proposed as an option, suggested as an option, that we would be prepared to finance infrastructure that otherwise wouldn't be able to be financed, it appears, in the ordinary course. And third is we think we'll hopefully develop a small group of products that would be operational here that we think have the potential to be taken beyond Toronto into other markets around the world. So that's really the basic
And just to
business
pick up on that
model.
last point then, so it's as I understand it, so if I've got Nest in my home, you're talking a product like that, but for capturing information in a public way?
Not necessarily at all. Let me give you an example of a product that we think is really interesting and important. The way in which we manage our streets. One of the real questions is how do we gain more people moving through our streets more efficiently without having to build more of them? So we actually think the management of curbs and the management of streets dynamically is a very important aspect of the cities of the future, let alone here. So the question is, could you create a product that would actually take data that might include data about traffic? It might include what we'll probably come back to, de-identified data about people, about LED lighting, for example, embedded in the streets in order to reduce the amount of streets that are actually necessary to save money, but more importantly, to enable greater throughput.
So some combination of, there's an analytics that you can bring to bear and potentially a tech that you can bring to bear in some ways with the various sensors as well, presumably. But it's not then it's very far away from the traditional business model. So you can confirm, I suppose. It was in the documents, but it's still a little bit difficult for me to understand given the traditional Alphabet monetization model.
I think you have to dismiss the notion that our business model has anything to do with Google's, because it really has nothing to do with it. So
there will be no monetizing personal information.
We have no interest in monetizing personal information. Maybe I should speak a little bit personally. My background is not someone who's been with Google. My background, in fact, where I've sort of made my mark is as a public servant. I was the deputy mayor of New York in the first 6 years after 9/11. I consider myself, and I think many of the members of our team consider themselves to be placemakers or city builders. And what we're really interested in is finding ways to improve urban life in the 21st century. Now, I know sometimes because of our affiliation with Alphabet and Google, people have a hard time believing that. And yes, as a company, we do have an obligation to actually earn a reasonable rate of return on the capital they invest in us. but I can tell you every single person at Sidewalk Labs is committed to that mission. That's what we're here to do. And we believe we actually have an opportunity to do something truly remarkable here. And we know we can't do it alone, that in fact, all we're trying to do is put forth a proposal that the people of Toronto and Ontario and Canada have the opportunity to vote on and hopefully get excited about.
And I've got two more questions, specifically one with respect to privacy by design and de-identified data. I assume from your previous answer that none of that information is being then combined with other information held by parent companies, so that's appreciated. There were resignations, and there's been some public consternation in the media with respect to resignations specifically on the privacy issue, and you have, to your credit, I think, brought privacy experts in, and a little bit worrying, some leave. What assurances can be given that those concerns raised by those experts who have resigned are being adequately addressed?
Well, I think the ultimate comfort that you can get is we can't do anything unless Waterfront Toronto and the relevant governments and privacy regulators all sign off on it. Because again, remember, all we did was agree to spend our own money to develop a plan that we hope people will be excited about. But at the end of the day, on every issue, including privacy and data, if we can't satisfy people, then we can't move forward.
And with my last question, I just want to pick up on that note because in your materials, there were two examples. One example is if Sidewalk Labs collects information, it would be open immediately and usable by others. In another example, a smaller company might want to monetize that information, and who makes that decision fundamentally? And you hinted that it won't be yourselves.
Right.
So in your view, is it a public-facing body that is making that decision?
So what we have suggested, and this is just a proposal, to some extent filling that void that has existed that we discussed earlier, in our proposal, we think an independent body, which could be under the auspices of a government, or it could be a more independent body called a civic data trust, ought to be responsible for that data. Our hypothesis is that anytime someone wants to use urban data, they would have to make a detailed application. We would be in the same position as everyone else to the data trust for approval of the use of that data. That application would include sort of what data is being collected, how it's going to be used, whether it's going to be open going forward, what kind of investment they actually have to make. Because part of what we do want to do is make sure that we find the right balance between ensuring that there is adequate privacy protection and also at the same time not completely chilling innovation. But those decisions would not be ours to make. Ultimately, the data trust, at least in our proposal, would then have oversight once something's been approved to ensure that the rules are being complied with.
Thank you. Mr. Erskine-Smith, next up for 5 minutes, Ms. Gord. Okay, go to Mr. Kent then.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Doctoroff, I don't think anyone on the committee would quibble with your public service in the city of New York. Your record is pristine, I believe. And I don't think anyone would quibble with the noble objectives for Sidewalk Toronto that you outlined. But in the absence of the final plan, given the opposition by some members of Toronto Council, the opposition we're told that exists quite deeply within Queen's Park, the provincial government, I just have to ask you for the record, and you may smile at this, but is Sidewalk Toronto one of your parent companies, one of Alphabet's famous moonshots? And for the benefit of other committee members, the Alphabet moonshots are audacious projects in which large amounts of money are invested, but if these projects don't pay off, the company walks away from them. And I think last year, I'm told by an article recently, that Alphabet's moonshots last year, these ventures walked away from, lost $865 million, which is quite a bit more than the $50 million that you represented here. Is there any way that Sidewalk Toronto could be considered a moonshot by your parent company?
We don't believe that's the case. We spend an awful lot of time with our parent, bringing them up to speed on everything that is happening here, and we believe that they are extremely excited about what we are doing. I should also point out that, speaking for the three of us and the other roughly 100 people at Sidewalk Labs, of whom about 27 are now in Toronto, that none of us think of it as a moonshot. I'm 60 years old, almost 61. I could be doing lots of different things. And I believe that I am spending sort of what may be the last major phase, and this project isn't going to happen fast, of my career on something that I think is extraordinarily important, where we can make an enormous difference.
Okay, now, Sidewalk Toronto has maintained in various situations that you're still in the hunt for finance partners. But the Globe and Mail last month came up with a document, a company document, that suggested you have already locked down some financial commitments. Is there any truth in that, in the document that the Globe and Mail says that it obtained?
Let me first correct the record and give the Star credit for uncovering finding a leak. But the answer is that, you know, one of the things that we have heard throughout our extensive consultations with many parties here is that there is a real interest among Canadian companies, pension funds, development firms in actually potentially participating alongside us. Our intent has never been that we should be the one to develop everything, that we'd love to have partners, and we'd love to have Canadian partners in this. And so we are open to them, but it is not true to say that we have locked down financing for anything.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned earlier that your first contact with Mr. Broadhead came after the RFP process. But as you know, as you mentioned, he was the Chief of Staff to the Minister of Infrastructure. And I'd just like to ask, you know, whether you had any contact with Minister Sohi's office before the RFP process.
I did not. And I don't believe anyone at Sidewalk Labs did at all. As Mr. Lasher said, we were incredibly diligent about following the rules of the RFP.
Now, Google last year established a record in terms of the amount of money that it spent on lobbying in Washington, D.C., $21 million, I think. I understand that the records show that you've registered 40 people to lobby in Toronto and the city and provincial government, and 8, including yourself, to lobby the federal government. To a lot of people, that would seem, compared to Facebook that claimed they didn't have any lobbyists in Canada when they testified before us, that would seem to be a pretty heavy emphasis on lobbying.
I'll ask Mr. Lasher to elaborate a little bit, but the reality is the vast majority, because of the nature of the lobbying rules, anybody who talks to government basically has to register as a lobbyist.
Facebook didn't.
Well, we did because we were really following the rules. And, you know, if you think about what we're trying to do, which is basically to develop a plan in consultation with government, 3 levels of government, not to mention Waterfront Toronto, we need to engage with them on an ongoing basis on the substance of what we're doing in terms of mobility planning, land use planning, infrastructure planning, in terms of the way the public realm functions, building codes. You know, we're innovating in a lot of different ways, and what we need to do is engage with civil servants in particular at all 3 levels of government, as well as constantly with Waterfront Toronto. And so we just have the work to do to develop the plan, and it is incredibly complicated. It's taken us even longer than we would have liked, because in some ways it's almost like a 50-sided Rubik's Cube, trying to put all these different pieces together in a way that's responsive to all of the literally thousands of comments that we have received, not just from government officials, but from the public, that is truly respectful of the objectives of Waterfront Toronto, as well as Canadian values.
Thank you, Mr. Kent. Yeah. We have Frank Baylis down next to speak, so 5 minutes. Are you
Yeah, and I'm going to just let Mr. Vaughn had a question he wanted to ask.
Just to start, then go ahead, Mr. Vaughn.
Just to review some of the AG, the Auditor General's findings from the province of Ontario, on the issue of pressure from senior levels of government to get a proposal finalized, your proposal, when it is finalized, will have the responsibility of contributing development dollars that will be part of the financing of the flood protection plan in the Portlands. Is that right?
I think not directly. Again, we're still finalizing things, but what I do believe will be possible is that we will generate, this project will generate, I think, a substantial amount of incremental tax revenue at all three levels of government.
Including development charges that will be paid to the City of Toronto, which is the way they're financing their contribution to flood protection in downtown Toronto.
That's correct.
Without the flood protection agreement in place, half of the downtown core would be vulnerable to a flood, the likes of which we've had 3 already. And the worry is that Toronto Danforth, Beaches East York, from an electoral perspective, but the eastern half of the downtown would be vulnerable to a major flood without the flood protection and the $1.5 billion investment in protecting those homes, properties, and businesses, but most importantly, people.
That is absolutely correct.
And the pressure that you were facing from the federal and provincial governments were not you as a company, but Waterfront Toronto was facing those pressures in order to make sure the financing was in place to get construction of that, including the naturalization of the Don, so that we didn't put people at risk as we tried to finalize the development process of the Portlands and Queens Quay East. And the financing of that required a 3 government approval, which is the pressure that you were facing, to get the approvals in place so that the financing could be orchestrated to protect millions of Torontonians.
Okay, we go ahead, Mr. Baylis.
Thank you. Then the second question.
Do I get to respond?
I hope you would. The second set of questions I have for you is related to your lobbying practices. You're governed by the City of Toronto Lobbying Act.
We're governed by the relevant lobbying laws of all three.
Including the City of Toronto.
Including
As
the City of Toronto.
If you were to send a junior architectural draftsperson to the buildings department to get the zoning or the building requirements as you would contemplate an 8-story and a 16-story building, I believe if I got the heights right, but that's the material. But if you were to send a junior architectural practitioner from your firm to acquire that data from the building from the building desk at the City of Toronto, as a corporate entity doing business with the City of Toronto, you would have to register that junior architectural draftsperson as a quote-unquote lobbyist in order for that person to interface with the City of Toronto Public Service. Is that not right?
That's correct, and we do that.
And if you wanted to get the specs for garbage pickup and went to Public Works, you would have to send a junior engineer from your office registered as a lobbyist to talk to the City of Toronto in order to get that done.
That's correct, and most of the people
would that account
registered
for
are
the
like
40 lobbyists you have registered? They're not actually lobbyists paid to lobby, but they are in fact functionaries who work for your engineering and architectural department, and to legally do business in the City of Toronto, thanks to a very scandalous contract with we won't get into the names of which political party was involved in the MFP scandal. We'll leave Lisa Raitt out of it for this moment. But the reality is this: is that as a result of those lobbying requirements, every single employee of yours that does has any interaction with any function at the City of Toronto must be registered as a lobbyist in order for you to be in complete compliance with the rules and regulations of doing development in the City of Toronto.
That's correct.
I'm surprised you only have 40 lobbyists.
We only have 100 people.
You haven't started the project yet. Wait till that happens. I have no more questions.
Mr. Baylis, you have about a minute. So,
On a separate front, the waterfront itself, if we look at, say, Toronto compared to Vancouver, I think Vancouver is a beautiful waterfront. I think Toronto's waterfront, as it's been developed so far, might as well, it's just paved. It could have been anywhere in the city. There's no beauty of the water. So I know we've talked about that. What are your views, and how are you going to be looking after making it actually a waterfront property and letting it for people, parks, things like that? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. We believe that the core principle upon which all of the planning that we've engaged with Waterfront Toronto, with the city, has really about returning the waterfront to the people and creating this very dynamic community centered around the water. And so what you will see is dramatically more parkland in this site than you would, say, on the rest of the waterfront. And we think it's the opportunity to actually create that is one of the primary assets that we're seeking to
And not just
achieve.
for the people living on the project.
No, absolutely. In fact, what we see, one of the very early principles that we established when we started Sidewalk Labs was that this place, wherever we did it, and this was before Toronto was even sort of on our radar screen, was that you would only be successful if this place, wherever we did it, was fully integrated into the surrounding metropolitan area, and significantly that it had to be completely porous, i.e. anyone could feel like they could actually come there. Ideally, anyone can feel like they can actually come and live there. In part because of the affordability approaches that we're taking, we actually do believe that compared to the rest of the downtown core, this could be by far the most inclusive community in downtown.
Okay, that's it. I just wanted to, just before we keep going here, we have about a half an hour left. I only have 3 scheduled questioners still on the docket, I guess. So if there are some people that still want to ask questions, if they could just inform the chair, and we'll go all the way to 5 if that's the way committee wants to go. But we'll go back, and we do, following that, because our guests have to leave, we're going to go into some committee business. We just have to discuss some things with regard to the International Grant Committee. So we'll go into camera for that at about 5 after 5. Okay, so we'll keep going. Next up for 5 minutes, Mr. Kent, Mr. Erskine-Smith, and then Mr. Angus. That's
Chair, because you'd asked us what we thought. I'd prefer just to end the round so we get to committee business, because
okay.
there's some other stuff that needs to get done this evening. So if, I feel we're doing well if we finish the round.
Sure.
Then go to committee business, and I know my colleagues have a meeting to go to as well.
I understand, but I prefer to ask the questions while the witnesses are here from my perspective.
Okay.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah, we only have till 5 anyway, so.
You keep giving your questions away.
I did.
So come on.
I gave a short question.
You gave
Okay, so
whining to me now, Frank.
That was a short question for Adam.
right back to the questions. Mr. Kent for 5 minutes.
Oh, well, thank you, Chair. And Mr. Doctorow, I'd like to make clear, when I first became conscious as a resident of the Greater Toronto Area, as a politician from the GTA, of the original Quayside project, I was excited by it. I was fascinated, and I assumed that there would be collateral benefit from even the 12-acre site. But I think in the months since, the controversy, the resignations, people like Ann Cavoukian, who resigned from the Digital Strategy Advisory Committee, the lack of information, I guess, the fact that information comes out with leaks, the Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail, and others, have sort of led me in some ways to agree, and I've introduced this, or I've quoted this document before in committee, but when Jim Balsillie said, from the start, the project should have been debated publicly and involved experts in IP and data. Instead, Waterfront Toronto continues to weaponize ambiguity. And you, of course, are familiar with his closing paragraph, which I won't read in its entirety. But one of the key lines is that Canadians continue to be treated to glitzy images of pseudo-tech dystopia while foreign companies profit from the IP and data Canadian taxpayers fund and create. I wonder if you could respond to Mr. Balsillie's quite passionate op-ed contribution last year.
Yeah, I say a couple of things. The first is, look, any project that seeks to break new ground and particularly is committed to reaching out and getting people's feedback before everything is clear is going to be a natural recipient of concern and criticism. And to be perfectly honest, we welcome the concern and criticism because we believe very strongly that it makes us smarter and more sensitive and makes the plans ultimately better. I would completely disagree with the characterization of this dystopian place. I think what you're going to find is, as we finally are able to put the entire plan together, that it's one of the most kind of people-friendly, dynamic communities anywhere, and that people are going to be truly excited about the fact that it will be coming, hopefully, to their city. And so, look, as I said, we were given a challenge as part of the RFP process, and that was to truly break new ground to solve problems that we know virtually every major city in the world, increasingly, especially Toronto, are facing. And it's not easy to do that. And we've been trying to play that out in public and get people's feedback, and that's a messy process. But I do believe that what we're going to come back with hopefully will reignite that excitement that you had. And I should also point out that, I'll just go back to what we said in the opening statement. We don't have a right to do anything. All we've been doing is putting together a plan that, in relevant parts, you and the provincial government and the city government and Waterfront Toronto, hopefully with the kind of opinion of the public, will have an opportunity to say, yeah, it meets those lofty objectives or it doesn't.
Have you reached out to Mr. Balsillie?
I actually have, not directly, but indirectly on a number of occasions, and he has expressed no interest in meeting with us.
Now with regards to the de-identification of data that will be eventually collected by the Quayside project, you have said that you will guarantee that you will de-identify, that Sidewalk Toronto will, but you can't guarantee that third parties wouldn't. Why not?
Let me clarify that. The reason is that what we have suggested through this civic data trust is that it be responsible for the management of urban data, not us. So what we didn't want to do is bind that entity to a set of rules or principles. We think it'll be up to that entity, which could be a public entity. It could be an independent entity with public representation, because we just didn't think it was appropriate for us to be the ones doing it.
Mr. Kent, if I just may add as well for context. Our vision for this place is a thriving ecosystem where there are lots of companies doing lots of things. Yes. And in fact, we aim to do, in some respects, the smallest amount possible necessary to catalyze that environment. And so at the end of the day, what we're proposing is a governance regime that would apply to all actors in the space that we are not driving. So we wouldn't have, in any case, the power to say, startup A that comes to Quayside and sets up shop and has an innovative idea that the city is interested in, we wouldn't have authority over that company in the first place. But we are proposing that there be a governance regime that would have authority over us and anyone else operating in the space. So and I should say, and we're making commitments about how we will conduct ourselves out of the gate. But and of course, we would hope that the commitments that we would make, the impositions that we would take upon ourselves, would become the rules of the road. That would be in our interest. But at the end of the day, we think the right thing to do here would be to have independent governance.
And in terms of Mr. Balsillie's criticism,
did you want another?
Oh no, I'll take another round.
After?
Sorry,
Okay,
Chair.
sure.
I don't want
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kent. Next up for 5 minutes, Mr. Erskine-Smith.
Thanks very much. I think a part of the concern, and I respect this commitment to de-identification, I respect this commitment to a civic data trust, but I mean, you got to understand, you tell me as a citizen of Toronto that there are going to be sensors and cameras all over the place, and I'm very worried at the prospect. You tell me Google is involved, and I'm very worried at the prospect when I know that the Fundamental or Alphabet is involved. I worry at the prospect. So I appreciate it, but I think knowing that, internalizing that, and understanding when you talk about this, that is the basis of great concern. I was recently in Brussels, and I met with the EU data protection supervisor, and his deputy said, I think others have said the same, we're so worried about Big Brother, we forgot about the companies, which are sort of little sister. And I think when we talk about cameras and sensors everywhere, that's what I would worry about. And so I think you are right to say ultimately this is up to a public-facing body to make a final decision. You're right to say openness and de-identification and respecting personal privacy and data protection. Is there a sense of what privacy laws apply currently?
I think that obviously the Canadian laws, PIPEDA is a relatively strong regime, certainly one that we will scrupulously abide by. And I should be clear, we are not seeking in any way any exemptions from PIPEDA or any other relevant privacy laws in this space. And the governance regime that we're proposing would be additive to that. I think that the challenge is that PIPEDA and most privacy-related laws don't deal with non-personal information, that, as is the case with urban data. And I think one of the things that
when you say non-personal, it's because it's de-identified?
You could have data that is either at its initiation non-personal, so a pedestrian counter. Sure. There's, of course, the question of at what point the data, sure. But there's data that both starts out in no way being personal information, then you have data that is personal, camera footage that is converted into line drawings that becomes de-identified, right? But certainly in the case of aggregate non-personal information, that is not something that is strongly covered by existing privacy laws, and that is increasingly something that is at issue in cities.
Yet we have examples already. So I rely upon Google Maps. My sense of directions is terrible at the best of times, and that is built on open data from cities with respect to traffic patterns. And when I'm driving around the city of Toronto. How is this different, or is it just on a different scale and so many different players that you imagine being involved that the Civic Data Trust and not the City of Toronto is the right place for openness and defining and determining standards?
I don't think we're suggesting that it shouldn't be the City of Toronto. What we are suggesting is that having a mix of experience to make decisions about kind of types of data that really have never been thought about deeply before might be the best way to manage it effectively, taking into account the need to have a very strict privacy regime, but at the same time not to chill innovation completely. But at the end of the day, that may not be the right choice, and the city or others may choose to do it in a different way, which we're okay with. We just think what the objectives of finding that right balance are important, and having multiple voices could be important to doing it correctly.
And my last question is, in the materials, and this was to follow up to the last question that I had in the last round. In the materials, the two examples were pretty stark because it's Sidewalk, sort of subsidiary of major company, when they collect data through their sensors as proposed and approved by whatever data trust, that will be open for everybody. Smaller company, sympathetic local small business, say, applies with a particular technology, and maybe that information won't be open right away because it's a startup and they need to monetize. And is there any situation, or I guess, am I to take from that Sidewalk Labs or any related company will not apply
I think the
for
default
proprietary?
is that it will be open. There may be situations where we have to invest an awful lot of money to create an application or use that we believe has value both in this place and potentially beyond, where we could also apply to the data trust.
But you see that as an exceptional circumstance?
I do think it generally as an exceptional circumstance. Said by default, we want urban data to be open, whether for us or for others. As we said, we also want it to be de-identified by default, but there may be situations where a case can be made that you don't ever get the value of it without having, more restricted ownership of the data.
Is made by a Civic Data Trust
Not
in
by
consultation
us.
with privacy regulators.
That's exactly right.
All right, thank you.
We have 3 folks up left, starting with Mr. Angus, so we'll give each person 3 minutes, and it should take us close to 5. So, Mr. Angus, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Broadhead, what was your contact when you were with Infrastructure Canada with Waterfront Toronto?
I had fairly frequent contact with them on a number of files. They had, the Portland's flood protection. So I had fairly regular contact with them in general.
Were you talking with them about the Toronto Expo bid?
Not to my recollection.
Okay. Because I spoke with people who were involved in the Toronto Expo bid, and they said that there was discussion about the possibility of using Waterfront, but after the new government came in, there was a real chill because the Prime Minister's office is very much interested in the Google deal, and that's what they told me. So I was wondering if you were involved in those discussions.
No, I did meet with the Expo group, but it had nothing, no linkage between that and the and Quayside, as far as I know.
So, Mr. Doctorow, you said someone reached out. Was that Will Fleissig that reached out?
No, his name was Chris Glacick,
Chris
who was a senior staff person at Waterfront Toronto.
Okay.
As I'd indicated before, Chris and I had worked together back in the kind of late 90s and early 2000s on the New York's Olympic bid, and Chris was one of the planners for that bid that I led.
Because Will Fleisig's office reached out in 2016.
It was in June. Chris Glacick worked for Will
Yeah,
Fleissig
yeah, yeah.
in June of 2016. This was a process. They had begun reaching out to companies in February 2016. We were about the 25th company that Waterfront reached out to in June of 2016.
There were frequent communications. You were provided surveys, drawings, topographic illustrations. You signed a non-disclosure agreement. This was all prior to the RFP. So you don't feel you were getting an extra advantage?
Again, we were one of 52 companies that they provided information. Half of the information, depending on how you want to quantify it, that they provided us was also provided to Ellis Don. And as the independent review by Denton's confirmed, this was information that was incidental to the RFP itself and publicly available in other forms.
There could have been 52 other companies that got this.
I think, and that was effectively Justice Osborne said the same thing, that the information we requested would have been made available to anyone else. It is conceivable that we were simply more excited about this opportunity and more focused on it than others.
It is conceivable because Eric Schmidt said that they were really looking for, quote, someone to give us a city and put us in charge, and they gave you the city of Toronto.
No.
But he did also say, and I'm not quoting the Auditor General here, I'm quoting your boss, so you're going to have to trust what he said. But he said that this project might, quote, require substantial forbearances from existing laws and regulations. You know, as a legislator, and we're looking at probably the most prime real estate in North America, when a company wins a bid and says we want to be exempted from laws, I got to ask myself, what laws are you looking to be exempted from if we're going to give you the city?
Let me clarify that. First of all, let me also put some context around your quote from Mr. Schmidt. He was joking. And it says, at this point, this is Mr. Schmidt paused for laughs from the audience. He then said, quote, it's not how it works, guys, for all sorts of good reasons. By the way, it doesn't work that way. So the notion that he wanted to be given a part of the city
Well,
was
thank God for something there. That's
all right.
good.
Well,
But what about those laws that he expects to be given forbearances from?
well,
I mean,
let me-
that's kind of I don't know real estate deals that come in and say we want to be exempted from Canadian law. What are the laws you don't like here?
It's not exempted from Canadian law. It is for regulations and laws potentially to be changed in order to enable the initiatives that will make possible the achievement of the goals that Waterfront Toronto established. Let me give you a very simple
Still has that,
example.
like substantial forbearances
Yeah,
from
well,
existing
so-
laws
so
and
let-
regulations. Everybody would love that if they were trying to get real estate
Well,
deals.
but let me give you an example. So right now, under the regulations, building code of the City of Toronto, you cannot have a wood building that is more than 6 stories high. Okay, we believe that it is possible, and we've seen in Vancouver now buildings of, I think, up to 18 to 20 stories high that are made of mass timber. We believe they can potentially go higher than that. Now, why do you want a wood building? Why are wood buildings? For one thing, they are dramatically more sustainable. Secondly, they actually have higher fire safety ratings than steel and concrete.
Well,
let me
I
finish.
represent a mill town, so I'm totally into this.
Well, this is a big deal.
I just can't imagine that Eric Schmidt was
Mr.
thinking about my mill workers when he said that. But I'm totally into the wood, man. I'm totally there.
But the biggest thing is you can reduce the cost at scale by almost 20%, which we think could be a major contributing factor to achieving affordability.
We'll go to Mr. Bayless for 3 minutes.
So we find ourselves here because Waterfront comes up with this idea and puts out a bid, and you win the first stage of the bid and then a kind of a big question comes up, which is this question of non-personal data. And we ask ourselves, like, who owns it, who controls it, who manages it, what can you do, what you can't do with this data suddenly. We start thinking about it, which we've never done. And to your point, there's no regulations on it. Now, my first question would be, who do you think should regulate it? The city, the province, or the federal government? Who would you like to see regulate this?
I don't think we have a point of view on that. I think we can see strong arguments for a variety of different alternatives, including, as we've said, sort of a new independent body under the auspices of whether it's Waterfront Toronto or any of the 3 levels of government, or simply it being an independent entity. What we believe very strongly, though, is that it has to be subject to a democratic process. And that ultimately, it's up to you, I say broadly, to decide where that ought to be. We'll live with it. But the only way people are going to have confidence is not if a company has control.
No, I understand.
But
that.
if
a government
it's
has,
done
yeah. So, but if I was a developer and we say, okay, the city of Toronto has its regulations, and now we got to go to the city of Whitby, just down the road, and they got their regulations, and we're going to go to Cobourg, they got theirs. It would seem to me as a developer, as anybody going into this route, like Pepita, you won't have Pepita for Toronto, and then Milton has a different Pepita and all that. It would seem to me that the regulator should be, at minimum, provincial, but probably better federal. And I would have thought from a developer's point of view, you'd want one set of regulations.
Again, I probably can argue it a bunch of different ways. The city of Toronto has an incredibly competent civil service.
But then you'd have to go through that same process every time, everywhere.
Yeah, and again, since I'm not a developer who works extensively in the GTA.
No, but I'm talking strictly about the data perspective. So you'd have to re-regulate data every single time.
But we're talking about it being generated in a specific place.
No, I know that wherever the data is generated, like Pepita applies no matter where you generate within the country.
As I said, I think an argument could be made.
So let me ask you another question then. Whether it's the city of Toronto or the province or the federal government, because it's so new, and you're looking at the type of people that would write it or the bureaucrats, and then we'd have to fit. What would you see as a process, whether it's us or someone else? Because why you're being this weight that's put on Google, because people don't trust you, and that's fair enough, but these regulations are not in place. So how would you go about had they been in place, this whole discussion wouldn't be happening because you would just have to meet them like anybody else. How would you see us going about putting them in place, whether it's federal, provincial, or municipal?
Well, I think an important step was taken by Councillor Cressy and by the Toronto City Council to initiate a process by which the city would consider a framework on these issues for the City of Toronto. I think my sense of the work of this committee is that that this committee has been studying a range of issues touching on this work, and I think this could be a very good place for that conversation to begin. I think we are cognizant of the deliberation involved in the legislative process, and so I think one way that Waterfront Toronto could move to implement a geographically specific regime would be through the contracts that they entered into with us or with other developers, so that for a certain area we were contractually bound and others were contractually bound to abide by certain rules. That would be potentially an interim measure while the legislative process unfolded around these issues.
As part of your development of the project itself, you're actually going to be developing these rules, these governance rules have to be developed together, whether it's with the city or the province. So you have to develop those.
In every case, I mean, Mr. Angus observed our need to do. Again, I think the important thing to note here is we're talking not just about changes in the rules in an expansive direction, as in the case of tall timber, but we're also talking about the imposition of new rules that we believe will achieve Waterfront Toronto's objectives. At the end of the day, in both cases, those decisions are not up to us. We are simply offering ideas. We think that a robust democratic discussion has a lot of people throwing ideas onto the table, but ultimately it's up to you to decide which of those ideas are good and which are not.
Thank you, Mr. Bayless. That's it, folks. We've had the last questioners already. The questions have been answered. So I'd like to thank you for coming to Ottawa today, all of you presenting to the committee. And we're going to just suspend for a few minutes until our guests exit, and then we'll reconvene and vote at 5. Thank you again. Yes. Yeah. Spending.